Hello and welcome to the lesson. We're going to learn how to create the very popular three-column layout. Here I have an HTML document with a basic layout structure created with div elements. I have the header, the navigation, right and left sidebars, and finally the footer. All of these sections are enclosed within the wrapper div. Using CSS, I added a different background to each section. Let's go ahead and start positioning. First is the header. I'd like the header to be 900 pixels wide and 150 pixels high. As you can see, the header displayed properly after browser refresh. Next, I'll place the navigation. The navigation will be a horizontal panel with links. I'll set the same width as the header and the height to 40 pixels. As you can see, a red navigation section appeared under the header. Under the navigation, I'd like to place the left sidebar, the content section, and the right sidebar, in that exact order. I'll divide the total width of 900 pixels to 400 pixels for both sidebars and 500 pixels for the content. First, I'll set the width of the sidebar to 200 pixels and the height to 400 pixels. After refreshing the browser, the panel has appeared on the left side. Next, I'll add the content section. I'll keep the height at 400 pixels and change the width to 500 pixels. We mustn't forget to move the element up, so I'll add the margin top property and set the value to minus 400 pixels. This will place the content section over the left sidebar, so I also have to add the margin left property and move it 200 pixels to the right. I'll check to see if everything was positioned correctly. Next is the right sidebar. Its dimensions will be the same as the left sidebar. This means that the width will be 200 pixels and the height 400 pixels. Again, we have to use the margin property to move the panel to the right place. To do that, I'll set the margin top property to minus 400 pixels and the margin left property to 700 pixels. It's 700 because we have to move it across the left sidebar and the content section. After refreshing the browser, the yellow column displayed correctly. Finally, we have to create the footer. The dimensions will be the same as the navigation, which is 900 by 40 pixels. Let's maximize the browser and look at the result. Notice that all sections have fixed dimensions set in pixels. Let me show you what happens if I add a larger amount of text inside the content area. I'll paste the text from the clipboard and maximize the browser window. As you can see, there wasn't enough space inside the content div and the text overflowed. The easiest solution to this is to add the overflow property. This property specifies what happens if there isn't enough space for the text inside a div. If I set the value to auto, nothing will happen. The text doesn't overflow. However, if the text should overflow, a scroll bar will appear instead. As you can see, a scroll bar appeared after refreshing the browser, and the text remained inside the 500 by 400 pixels area. But wouldn't it be an improvement if the height was fluid, meaning that it will change depending on the amount of content? It certainly would, and I'm going to show you how to do it. I'll open another HTML document with the same header, navigation, and footer. We have to use a different method to create the three columns. I'll open a style sheet with the same CSS rules for the columns that we used in the previous example. To align elements with a fluid height, we use the float property. This property can position the element either to the left or right. But how do we place the content section in the middle? I'll show you a little trick. First, I'll create two div elements. I'll set the float property to the left for the first one and to the right for the second one. Next, I'll slice the second div into another two. By doing so, I'll get three columns. The first div is the left sidebar, as you can tell from its name. The right div is only auxiliary. We'll create the content and the right sidebar inside it. Let me add some text and switch to the style sheet. The header, the navigation, and the footer remain the same. I added two new rules for the left bar and right divs. As you can see, both divs are aligned according to their name. After refreshing the browser, two columns displayed. Now I'll divide the purple column into the content section and the right sidebar. I'll switch back to the code editor and delete all text from the auxiliary right div element. Next, I'll cut this element into 2 new divs so that I get a total of 3 divs. First, I'll create the content div, which will be the middle column. Then I'll create the right bar div, which will be the right column. Now the column structure is finished. I'll just add some filler text and switch to the style sheet. The content div is enclosed within the right div. Because of that, I'll first create the selector of the right identifier and then the selector of the content identifier. I want the content to be 500 pixels wide and aligned to the left. I'll set the float property to left, and I'll also add a gray background. I'll repeat the process for creating the right bar identifier selector. Next, I'll set the width to 200 pixels. I'll also align the sidebar to the right and set the background color to yellow. Let's take a look at the result in a browser. The green column has the float property set to left. The content area and the yellow column are inside the purple div, which is aligned to the right. The content has the float property set to left, whereas the yellow sidebar is to the right. To finish off, I'll delete the background of the auxiliary right div. Now we've finished creating a 3-column layout with the fluid height of all the columns. You may think that the result doesn't look very good. Let me open one more website over here. It's the exact same code, I only changed the formatting a little. To be specific, I changed the color of the text and backgrounds, and I also added some borders. When I switch to the code editor, you see that the code is the same except for some additional headings, and the CSS code didn't change much either. I only added a couple of properties that you're already familiar with. Thank you for joining me today, and I'll look forward to seeing you the next time.